Jeff Weisenberger, editor and publisher of Modern Steel Construction, as you know, is the monthly magazine of AISC, and I'm here in San Antonio, Texas for the 2024 NESCC, the Steel Conference, and I am sitting here with bridge industry legend, Mike Grubb, who is the executive director at M.A. Grubb and Associates. Mike is the winner of AISC's J. Lloyd Kimbrough Award, which recognizes the preeminent steel designers of their era. So just to give you a little bit of background on the award, Mike is just the 13th person to receive it since its inception, since 1941. And previous recipients include Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Fazler Khan, Leslie Robinson, and others. Also David Ruby most recently. So you're in good company, Mike. Yeah. Congratulations, well-deserved, and thanks for being here to chat with me.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. It's quite an honor. When I look at those names, I'm really flabbergasted by the whole thing.
Yeah, well, and you are one of those names now.
Yeah, so it's very cool, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk a little bit about your work with bridges, but let's go back a little bit further than that. Can you talk a little bit about where you grew up?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Philadelphia, actually, Pennsylvania, and we moved to, my father got transferred up to Orono, Maine when I was 8. So I actually grew up in Maine, which was very cool. And then I went to school in New York State. I got my undergrad at Clarkson University and my master's at Cornell. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of how I ended up in the steel bridge industry, really. As it turns out, I wanted to go to Cornell. And they had a scholarship offer through the U.S. Steel Research Lab outside of Pittsburgh. And so I had, the deal was you would get 2 semesters, you get your graduate tuition paid, and you only had to work at the lab for 2 summers. Okay. So I went down and interviewed against 3 guys from Cornell, and Jerry Heyer, the late Jerry Heyer, was actually the interviewer. Oh, wow. And I answered one question they didn't on torsion, and the rest is history. Wow. So I got the scholarship, and then I went to work at U.S. Steel in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, at their lab. And a gentleman named Phil Karskadden took me under his wing there, and he was the author of the Simon program, which is now widely used in the industry, bridge design program. Sure. He's the original author back in the 70s, and he taught me a lot about steel bridges, and that's where I got interested in them. Okay. And so when I went back to Cornell for my graduate degree, he would send me letters and articles, and he just kept me interested. And so I decided to stay at the lab after I got my master's degree. And that's how I ended up in Pittsburgh. I've been there ever since. And that's how I ended up working on steel bridges. Okay. Well, yeah, it's amazing. That's one of those memorable, unforgettable moments that you answered a question about torsion, and that was that. That's outstanding. Yeah. So I worked for Jerry Heyer there at the lab, and then he went to AISC. Right. And I was actually going to go work for AISC at the time, but I was getting married, and she didn't want to move to Chicago. So I ended up having to quit not going to Chicago, and stayed in Pittsburgh then. Sure. So I went to work for HDR, a big consultant, bridge consultant, and in Pittsburgh.
Let's back up a little bit even before that. So what made you decide to go into engineering in the first place?
Well, my father was a civil engineer. He was a drainage engineer. Okay. My brother was an engineer. He designed hydroturbines. It's sort of in the family. And, I sort of followed my father's footsteps, went into civil engineering. And in school, they have you take their classes in the different disciplines. And I just sort of was attracted to the structures part of it. So. And then I kind of like bridges more than buildings, I guess, after I worked at it some more. And that's sort of how it all evolved. Sure. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you had, so it sounds like in the family, some civil engineering sort of experience. But a lot of people, I feel like when I talk to that get into working on bridges or specializing in bridges, most of them don't start off going, I want to build bridges. They start off, like you said, like with buildings, and then find their way to bridges, so to speak. I've always found bridges to be a little more interesting because they have, moving loads and composite design, unsymmetrical sections, things like that are much different. You're not taught a lot of that in college. And I learned a lot of it just through the old U.S. Steel Highway Structures Design Handbook.
Wow.
Which was the only thing available back then when I got out of school to learn about bridges.
Okay.
It was a well-done handbook, still in existence today under NSBA. And that's where I learned a lot of it, and I found it to be very interesting, so I stuck with it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, obviously every building's got its challenge, but every bridge does too.
Yeah.
Very good. But so you've obviously been in the industry for a while. From a project perspective, is there? I'm sure you've got a lot of them, but is there like one or two projects that really stick out in particular?
My career has been very unique that way because I have really never actually designed
Yeah.
a large structure or anything. I did design help with an overpass bridge, but that's about it. So I think I've contributed in other ways by working on the specifications. That's mainly what I do. Developing the steel specifications for bridge design, editing them, keeping them up to date. I've been doing that for close to 40 years.
Wow.
And I'm really the guy that they come to do this. I mean, it's sort of unique. And then I've done a lot of development of design courses, design examples. So I feel like I like to teach people how to do the design. And I feel if I can't understand the specifications, then nobody else is going to, because I'm just kind of a regular guy.
Sure.
And so I like to write them so people can hopefully understand the background and what's going on. And I hope I've been successful at that over the years.
I think you've been successful with it. You're talking about teaching. Is there ever a part of you that ever wanted to go into teaching?
Yeah, I thought about it, but I didn't really want to go back and get a PhD, which you sort of have to do.
Yeah. You have to
so
write that pesky dissertation.
Right. So I just do it through mainly the National Highway Institute of the Federal Highway Administration. We teach a lot of courses.
Right. Well, and that's great because that's like the best of both worlds. Like you don't have to get your PhD. You can still get up. We were talking earlier about how this conference is one of the rare ones where you didn't actually have to present, but that's not typical, right?
Yeah. No, I've given a lot of talks over the years, different subjects, many different subjects, and I've always enjoyed it. It's always been interesting to do these talks and to see the reaction and the interest.
I got to ask, I want to talk about this, your work with publications a little bit, but just do you have, I'm sure you've got a lot of advice, but do you have one particular piece of advice for people who are wanting to get into designing bridges?
Well, I would say you need to do a lot of work on your own. You need to study it. There's a lot of material out there now that wasn't out there when I started. Like I mentioned, only the handbook was available.
Right.
Now the NSBA has done a great job, the National Steel Bridge Alliance, on their website, and there's lots of examples and publications. And you really need to do some bedtime reading, I always say. You got to study this stuff. And go through the examples yourself by hand to really understand what you're doing. Understand the basis of it, the formulas, how to apply them properly. I think that's very important.
Sure. I agree. And so, back to publications. You've authored what in the neighborhood of 40 or so, and then worked on countless others. I'm sure. What do you have? Something you would consider your masterpiece, so to speak?
Well, I worked for a guy named Dan Hall. He had a company called BSDI that did a lot of. They were doing 3D analysis of bridges in 1983, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So they were 25 years ahead of their time, almost. And so I worked for him for 14 years, him and his partner, and I learned a lot from them. They were very, very good teachers and big players in the industry that often don't get the credit they deserve for what they did. And so he and I wrote a 1,000-page reference manual for on curved and skewed bridges that won awards. And I'd say I'm the most proud of that thing.
Okay.
And I've written 2,000 or 3,000-page manuals now over the years, for the NHI courses to go along with them. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, so it takes time, but we just ground through it, and And
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, how do you get yourself into the mindset knowing that you're going to have to put something together that long? I mean, is it just
keep going?
Right. I guess it's one page at a time, right?
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and, as long as you don't have a deadline, like I need this manual in 2 weeks. Yeah.
And then I've been working with Frank Russo on a college course for NSBA.
Okay.
And that was a fun project. We worked 2 years on that.
Okay.
So that's going to be eventually given away to faculty.
I was wondering, what's the kind of like the process there? You kind of put together the curriculum and then put it out and let the professors.
And they can do whatever they want with it. They can use it as a basis for a class or tweak it to develop their own. But it will have all the information they need. You know, the need to know stuff is in there. And
then the professors can kind of interpret it the way they need to.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to be a great product when it's...
is there a timeline?
It's coming in the next few months.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
Oh, excellent to hear. I just on a personal note, it sounds like you've been in Pittsburgh for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there once. I loved it. But do you have is there anything people need to know about Pittsburgh that they may not already?
Well, I think it's a great city. I think people would be surprised if they went there. It's low cost of living, relatively low cost of living, a lot to do, beautiful with the three rivers. The neatest thing is when you drive through the Fort Pitt Tunnel coming into the city and boom, there it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what attracted it to me. When I first went there, was seeing that vision there.
Right. I've got a few other folks have mentioned that, and they were right. And when we went to the Steel Conference there a few years ago, it was my first and only time in Pittsburgh, and I was pretty blown away. But that drive from the airport and the winding roads was beautiful. And then, a few people had told me what you just said about the Fort Pitt Tunnel. Yeah. And my only regret is I didn't do it at night. During the day,
at night is
even
something
more spectacular at night.
But it's amazing how many people mention that as the reason they went there.
Yeah, it's a great first impression.
Yeah, it is. And I've made a lot of friends there over the years. And the only bad thing is it's cloudy a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the only downside, but all the other things outweigh that.
So. Very true.
In my mind, anyway.
Right. And what's your opinion on the Primanti Brothers sandwich?
Oh, I like them. I like them. A lot of people don't. Some people say, "What is this with the coleslaw and the French fries on the sandwich?" But I like them a lot. I would recommend them.
Well, and it's a classic thing. I always like it when a city can have its own kind of unique cuisine that you can't. I mean, you probably could get something similar everywhere else, but it's just known for that. Right. So, very good. So your company, it's M.A. Grubb and Associates.
Yeah.
So who are the associates?
There are no associates. When we formed the company, the lawyer suggested that name, and I said, "What do you mean? There's nobody else." And she goes, "Oh, it sounds good.
Yeah, we're keeping it.
It rolls off your tongue."
Yeah, right. It adds a sense of legitimacy.
So it never fails to get a laugh. I always tell people that.
Well, you could make up a couple of other names like Grubb, Jones, and Johnson or something.
They said a lot of people told me I'm sure the associates were thrilled about the award. And I said,
yep,
we
all were. 100%.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have one more question. I don't know if you're much of a traveler. I mean, I know you have to obviously travel for work, but do you have, as far as a vacation, do you have, what's the next big one you have planned or hoping
I'm actually in the middle of one here.
Oh, really? Okay. That's good.
This buddy of mine from Pittsburgh and I have been renting a condo in Siesta Key, Florida for a month.
Oh, cool.
So I take my printer and my office down there, and this fell right in the middle of it.
Oh, perfect.
So I just came over for a few days, and then I'll go back there and finish it off.
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to every year. This is our 5th year doing it.
Yeah.
It's been a good time.
Well, especially Pittsburgh in the winter.
Yeah, you get out and it helps.
Yeah, it's
it definitely helps.
Yeah, you need it.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thanks again. I really appreciate it. Thanks for everything you've done for the industry, and
I've been happy to do it.